The church bells were already tolling in the distance, their metallic chime echoing through the crisp morning air as though the heavens themselves were calling people to witness what was supposed to be the happiest day of Daniel and Sophia's life. Guests were arriving in their finest clothes, women adjusting their hats, men tugging at ties, children whispering and giggling as the old wooden doors creaked open to reveal the decorated altar inside, with white roses cascading down golden stands and candles flickering gently against the stained glass windows. Daniel stood in front of the altar in his sharp black tuxedo, his hair neatly combed, but his palms were sweating against the cuffs of his sleeves, because beneath the polished surface of his smile was a storm no one could see. He was a man raised on principles, honesty, and trust, values carved into him by his late father who had always said, "A man can lose his wealth, his health, his name, but if he loses his truth, he loses everything." Daniel believed that. He lived by that. And today, of all days, he needed it to be real. His eyes darted nervously down the aisle every few seconds as the organist rehearsed soft chords, as if trying to reassure himself that the love of his life would appear in her white gown and that everything he had built emotionally for years wasn't about to come crashing down. For Sophia, however, the morning had been a battlefield of the soul. She sat in the bridal chamber, veiled and radiant in her lace dress, yet her reflection in the mirror didn't show a glowing bride, it showed a haunted woman, her eyes rimmed with worry, her lips trembling. Behind her, her bridesmaids fluttered around, adjusting her veil, fixing her bouquet, giggling nervously about how beautiful everything looked. But Sophia barely heard them. She was choking on a secret she had carried for far too long, a secret that had become a stone in her chest, heavy and suffocating. She loved Daniel, more than she thought was possible, but before Daniel, in the darker chapters of her past when she was lost and desperate for belonging, she had made choices, 2 reckless nights with 2 different men, neither of whom mattered now, neither of whom had stayed in her life, but whose shadows clung to her like ghosts. She had never told Daniel. How could she? He was pure, trusting, hopeful. Every time he looked at her with those eyes that seemed to see the best version of her, she couldn't bear to destroy that image. But now, with the vows minutes away, the weight became unbearable. She felt as though God himself was pressing down on her shoulders, whispering that truth always finds its way out, and if she dared to say, "I do," without confession, the marriage would be built on a lie so fragile it would shatter before it began. Down in the pews, Daniel's mother, an elegant but stern woman named Eleanor, clasped her rosary tightly, whispering prayers under her breath. She had never entirely approved of Sophia, seeing her as too impulsive, too mysterious, not quite the steady woman her son deserved. Yet, for Daniel's sake, she had held her tongue. Across from her sat Sophia's family, her father, proud but tense, and her younger sister who watched with wide eyes, clearly sensing the tension in the air. The atmosphere was thick, as though everyone felt the undercurrents without knowing why, like the way animals sense an earthquake before it strikes. The best man, Matthew, Daniel's lifelong friend, leaned over and whispered, "Relax, brother. She'll walk down that aisle any second, and this will all be history. Just smile and breathe." Daniel nodded, but deep inside he couldn't shake a strange feeling, a gnawing sensation that something was about to shift. Upstairs, Sophia finally stood, clutching her bouquet so hard the petals bent beneath her fingers. She turned to her maid of honor, her childhood friend Emily, and whispered in a trembling voice, "Emily. I can't do this unless I tell him." Emily's eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. "What do you mean? Tell him what?" "You'll ruin everything, Sophia. Everyone is here, the church is full, your family, his family, you'll humiliate him, you'll destroy yourself." Sophia's tears spilled, blurring the white silk and gold trim in the mirror's reflection. "But if I don't tell him, I'll be lying at the altar. He deserves the truth, even if it breaks him. Even if it breaks me." Emily tried to grab her hand, to stop her, but Sophia pulled away, lifting her veil over her face with trembling fingers. "No, Emily. I can't start my life with him like this. He'll hear it from me, even if it costs me everything." The music swelled. The organist shifted into the wedding march. Gasps and smiles rippled through the pews as Sophia appeared at the entrance, her father holding her arm, guiding her slowly down the aisle. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, the world stilled. She looked angelic, glowing beneath the light of the stained glass, her veil shimmering, her steps delicate. And yet, Daniel's heart felt heavy, because her eyes did not shine with the unshakable joy he had imagined. They looked clouded, burdened, as if each step was a struggle against invisible chains. Finally, she reached the altar. Her father handed her hand to Daniel's, their fingers locking in what should have been a sacred bond. The priest smiled warmly, opening his Bible, beginning the ceremony with the words that had echoed through centuries, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today," but Sophia wasn't hearing him. Her pulse thundered in her ears, drowning out the words, drowning out everything except the pounding truth in her chest. She looked at Daniel, at his pure, hopeful face, and something inside her snapped. "Wait," she whispered at first, her voice trembling so low no one heard. Then louder, "Wait." The priest paused, the congregation stirred, whispers breaking out like wine through leaves. Daniel frowned, leaning closer. Concern in his eyes. "Sophia? What is it?" Her hands shook violently. Her bouquet slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor with a dull thud. Her veil shifted as she lifted it, revealing her tear-streaked face to everyone. "Daniel," she said, her voice breaking, carrying across the stunned silence of the church, "before I marry you, I have to tell you something. I can't say, I do, without you knowing the truth." Gasps echoed. The priest looked bewildered. Eleanor clutched her chest. Emily buried her face in her hands. Daniel, pale as a ghost, whispered, "Sophia, what are you saying?" She shook her head, tears falling freely now, her voice cracking under the weight of the confession. "I love you. More than I've ever loved anyone. But I need to be honest. I haven't been pure. I slept with 2 men before you. And I never told you. I was afraid you'd hate me, afraid you'd leave me. But if I marry you without saying this, I'll be living a lie, and you don't deserve that." The church erupted into murmurs, shocked gasps, disbelieving whispers racing through the crowd like wildfire. Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. His ears roared. His world spun. The words replayed in his head, "I slept with 2 men. I never told you." Every vow, every promise, every dream they had spoken about suddenly seemed fragile, as if they were made of glass shattering on marble. And yet, in that eternal silence that followed, every eye turned to Daniel, waiting for his response. His mother looked at him with expectation, Sophia with desperation, the congregation with breathless curiosity. And Daniel, standing at the altar, 5 seconds away from what was supposed to be the happiest moment of his life, now stood on the edge of the most defining choice he would ever make, whether to condemn her, forgive her, or do something so unexpected it would leave every soul in that church stunned. The church was a tomb of silence, though hundreds of people sat in the pews. Sophia's confession still echoed in the rafters, reverberating through every heart like a stone dropped into still water. Her veil had slipped back, her eyes wide and vulnerable, her body trembling as though the weight of her truth had drained her of all strength. Daniel stood motionless, his hand still half extended toward the bouquet that had fallen between them, his face unreadable, his breath shallow. For those few agonizing seconds, time stretched into eternity. Guests craned their necks, whispering in disbelief. Some shook their heads in scorn, others in sympathy. Eleanor, Daniel's mother, pressed her lips together, silently urging him to end this humiliation and walk away. Sophia's father clenched his fists, torn between shame and love for his daughter. Emily, the maid of honor, buried her face in her palms, unable to watch the fallout of a truth she had begged Sophia not to reveal. And in the eye of the storm stood Daniel, the groom, the man who had dreamed of this day since the moment he had first looked into Sophia's eyes and believed in forever. He opened his mouth once, then closed it, his throat tightening with the weight of words unformed. His mind was a whirlwind, her voice ringing over and over, I slept with 2 men before you. I never told you. It cut like a blade, but beneath the sting was a deeper question, one that his father's words echoed into his very bones. What is truth worth to a man, if he cannot bear to hold it when it hurts? His chest heaved. Slowly, he lifted his gaze to Sophia, her face awash in tears, her hands trembling so badly she couldn't even steady the fabric of her gown. She looked like a prisoner waiting for judgment, ready for the chains, ready for the condemnation. Then Daniel did something that stunned everyone. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. His hand reached for hers, not roughly, not coldly, but with a gentleness that shocked the audience into deeper silence. Sophia gasped, her breath caught, her eyes searching his face for anger, for betrayal, for disgust. Instead, he spoke in a steady voice, low but clear, carrying through the sacred air of the church. Sophia, he said, you think your past makes you unworthy of love. You think telling me this truth will break me, or break us. But what breaks a man isn't hearing the truth, it's living in lies. And today, you gave me the one thing I value more than anything else, honesty, even when it costs you everything. The crowd murmured again, this time not in outrage but in confusion, in awe, in disbelief at his calm. Sophia blinked, stunned, tears spilling faster. Daniel, you're not angry? You're not leaving me? Her voice cracked, heavy with desperation. Daniel's grip on her hands tightened, grounding her. Angry, he repeated, shaking his head slowly. Yes, my heart hurts knowing you carried this alone, that you were afraid of me, afraid of losing me. But leaving? No. You think love is only about perfect histories and spotless records? No. Love is about choosing someone despite their scars, despite their mistakes, despite the brokenness. I didn't come here to marry an angel without a past. I came here to marry a woman who is real, who has lived, who has struggled, who has fallen, but who stands here today choosing me, trusting me enough to show me her truth. Gasps spread across the pews. Eleanor looked as though the air had been knocked out of her chest, gripping her rosary so tightly it threatened to snap. Sophia's father let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Emily looked up at last, her jaw falling open. The priest himself was wide-eyed, blinking rapidly as though trying to remember his lines in the face of such raw humanity. Sophia, however, was trembling harder than ever, because she had prepared herself for rejection, humiliation, heartbreak, but she had not prepared for forgiveness, for love in its purest and most radical form. Her lips quivered, her voice shaking. Daniel, why? How can you forgive me so easily? I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. Daniel's eyes softened, and for the first time that morning, a faint smile curved his lips. That's where you're wrong, Sophia. Love isn't about deserving. It's about giving. And today, I choose to give. Not because you are perfect, but because you are mine. And because you had the courage to tell me the truth before we stepped into forever. That takes more strength than silence ever could. He paused, looking out at the crowd, his voice growing stronger. And let everyone here remember this, marriage is not built on pretending we have no pasts. It's built on facing our pasts, and still choosing each other for the future. The silence broke, not with whispers this time, but with applause. It began hesitantly, from one of the older guests in the back, then spread like fire through the pews until the entire church was clapping, tears glistening in eyes, hearts pounding with the rare sight of love laid bare in its rawest form. Sophia sobbed, her hands covering her face, her veil shaking with every breath. Daniel pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, shielding her as though the entire world could fall away and it wouldn't matter. Into her hair he whispered softly, "Your truth didn't ruin us, Sophia. It saved us." The priest, moved beyond words, cleared his throat shakily, then spoke with renewed gravity. If ever there was a moment that showed us the true meaning of vows, it is this. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. And so, Daniel and Sophia, if you still wish to, let us proceed with the vows. Sophia looked up at Daniel through tears, searching his face once more for even the faintest crack of doubt. But all she found was resolve, unwavering and fierce. She nodded, her voice trembling but sure. Yes. More than ever, yes. And so they stood there, hands entwined, speaking vows that now carried more weight than they ever could have imagined. I promise to stand by you in truth and in weakness, Daniel said, his eyes locked onto hers. I promise to never let fear silence honesty. I promise to love not just the best of you, but the broken parts too. Sophia's tears fell anew as she echoed her vows. I promise to never hide in the shadows again. I promise to face the truth with you, even when it scares me. And I promise to love you, fiercely, fully, no matter what comes. When the priest finally declared them husband and wife, when Daniel lifted her veil and kissed her with all the fire of forgiveness and promise, the entire congregation rose to their feet, applauding, weeping, shouting blessings as though heaven itself had poured down light upon the church. Eleanor, though still shaken, finally let her tears fall and whispered to herself, perhaps, this is what love really is. Sophia's father embraced his younger daughter, pride softening the years of hardness on his face. And Emily, wiping her eyes, whispered, You did it, Sophia. You really did it. Outside, when they emerged into the sunlight, the air felt different, lighter, freer, as though the storm had passed and only renewal remained. Guests surrounded them with hugs, praises, blessings. Reporters who had been invited for society coverage whispered to one another about the drama of the altar confession and the astonishing grace of the groom. Some called it madness, others called it bravery. But to Daniel and Sophia, it wasn't about what the world thought, it was about what they now knew. That truth, though painful, had become the foundation of something stronger than lies could ever build. Later that evening, when the crowd had thinned, when the music played softly in the reception hall and fairy lights twinkled overhead, Sophia leaned into Daniel's chest, her eyes still damp but her heart steady for the first time in years. You saved me today, she whispered. Daniel shook his head, kissing her temple. No, Sophia. You saved us. You gave me your truth. And truth is the only soil love can grow in. And as they swayed together beneath the lights, surrounded by laughter and music, their story had already begun spreading beyond those church walls. A story not just of love, but of courage, of confession, of the power of forgiveness that stunned everyone who heard it. For in a world obsessed with perfect appearances, Daniel and Sophia had shown something far more powerful, that love built on truth, no matter how flawed, is stronger than any facade of perfection. So, dear viewers watching this unfold, if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that real love is not about spotless pasts but about fearless honesty and forgiveness, then don't just stop here. Subscribe to this channel, because every story we tell carries the same fire, to inspire, to move, to challenge the way you see love, family, and life itself. Hit that subscribe button, because more stories are waiting, stories that will remind you of the strength of truth, the beauty of forgiveness, and the miracles that happen when love refuses to let go.